Mark II, another camera from Sony for vloggers. But this time, from the first one, this is actually kind of designed for vloggers. Like, they got some major things right with this camera. There's still a few things that not that they got wrong, but that I thought we were going to get that we didn't get. But on some of the major points on this camera, they got it right. And to be totally upfront and straightforward with you guys, this is my loaner camera from them, but I've already placed my order for this camera. I am getting a Sony ZV-1 Mark II that'll live in my bag. So despite a few shortcomings of this camera, I do want it. I want this bad. I like this camera a lot. Today we're gonna go over what is the ZV-1 Mark II, what are the kind of the major upgrades from the ZV-1 Mark I to the Mark II, and then lastly, I'll touch on how I use this camera, why I'm buying it, why I want to make sure that this is always with me, and in my super cool little hip pack that I wear right here, and I keep my camera in it, and my wife thinks I'm so cool with it, and definitely doesn't ever make fun of me and my cool hip pack. But let's first start with the top line features of the ZV-1 Mark II. And those three mainly being the new lens, a upgraded microphone, and an upgraded flip out touchscreen that is fully functioning touchscreen. But first let's start with that lens. Now, when the ZV-1 first came out, they really pitched this as like a vlogger's camera, but they put the 24-70, which is one of the old RX100 lenses, into this camera. And at 24 millimeters, everyone kind of looked at it and went, that's not wide enough for a vlogger. Like, everyone's used to seeing us run around with 16 to 35 millimeter lenses on our bigger cameras. So when you give me this at 24 millimeters, it is a significant difference. And while the ZV-1 Mark II didn't go all the way to 16 millimeters, it did go to the brand new 18 to 50 millimeter lens, which is such a good range. 18, but then all the way out to 50. I kind of wish I had that lens from a big camera. All right, here is the ZV-1 Mark I versus the ZV-1 Mark II with their widest mode. So 24 millimeters over here, 18 millimeters over here, and this is active stabilization turned off. So this is the widest that the ZV-1 Mark I gets. If I really reach my arm out there, that's as wide as I can get it. And ZV-1 Mark II, quite a bit wider. Like, this is much more kind of that vloggy look that we're all used to. And you're gonna see though, if I walk a little bit with these two cameras, like, no active stabilization, quite shaky footage. So let's throw active stabilization on and we'll see how tight they get when it's turned on. And here's the two cameras with active stabilization turned on. You can see the ZV-1 Mark I, like, this is why everyone complained that it wasn't a vlog camera, was that as soon as you, like, that's as far as my arm reaches. That's as wide as I can get this camera. And now you can see on the Mark II, it is significantly wider. Even with active stabilization turned on, if I walk a little bit, you'll see it's not like crazy smooth. It's for sure not dynamic stabilization, but it is significantly smoother and still a decently wide shot. The shot of the ZV-1 Mark I, like, you see why people complained about this camera so dang much. It's not very wide at all. Now, one note on this new lens is that while at the widest end, they are both still f1.8, by 35 millimeters, we lose a full stop of light on the ZV-1 Mark II. So while this guy can stay at f2.8 from 35 millimeters all the way to 70 millimeters, this guy drops down to f4 from 35 millimeters to 50 millimeters. Something to note. Now, the microphone on here is much improved. I love the microphone on these newer cameras. The ZV-E1 has this on top there, and now the ZV-1 Mark II has it. It is that multi-directional microphone. So with this built-in microphone, you can tell it to either record in all directions, which means it's gonna kind of shoot omnidirectional, or you can say, I want it to only shoot forward or only shoot rear. Here's a little show of the directionality of the microphone. So right now I have the mic set to all directions, which means that no matter if I'm in front of the camera or if I walk over here on the side of the camera, or if I'm right back here behind the camera, you can still hear me pretty dang good. It's all directions. But now there is the camera in front mic direction. So now it's really just gonna try to focus on what's in front of the camera, similar to what a shotgun mic would be doing. So you can see that if I go over here to the side of the camera, or if I go behind the camera, I'm the same distance away from the camera, but this time you can't really hear me while I'm behind the camera. If I come in front of the camera again, you hear me quite well. And that's pretty nifty to just have built into your camera. Now you can of course put something like the Rode Video Micro on top because we do have that microphone port on the side. You really could put any microphone onto this camera. And this is an intelligent smart shoe, so you could put the Sony, what is that microphone called? Like ECBM1 something? That's the mic from Sony that plugs into the hot shoe and can talk directly to the camera through the hot shoe, and you don't have this this dangly cable bit. But it's nice to know that just with this, just how I have it so that it fits nicely in my cool little hip pack here, I can pull this camera out and get pretty dang good audio just with the built-in microphone. And then the last of like those top 3 features is this touchscreen. This touchscreen is now fully functioning, which means that I can tap in here, I can change my settings, change my aperture, change my shutter speed, change my ISO, all from the touchscreen right here. And then similar to the ZV-1, I have all these on-screen controls. So I still have my function menu I can go into, but just on the screen, I can have record, I can turn on product showcase, I can change my zoom, I can go to playback, I can really switch a lot just from what's on the screen right here. Change that microphone functionality from front mic to rear mic to all directions. And I would say that while out shooting this camera for the last week and a half, I haven't really gone into the menus too much. Like I initially went into the menus, set everything up, had this all dialed and ready to go, and then I've really just used my on-screen controls. I've used my function menu, and between those two, you can pretty much control this entire camera. And between the ZV-1 Mark I and Mark II, those are kind of those three big things that are different. A newer, wider lens, a upgraded microphone, and that much better, brighter and full functioning touchscreen. And then other specs to note on here is it's still shooting 4K 30 frames a second with that 1-inch CMOS stacked sensor, and it can go to 1080 at 120 frames a second, which is amazing, but I kind of thought we were gonna get 4K 60 on this camera. I thought that was gonna be kind of that spec bump within the frame rate zone, but no, still the same here, 4K 30, 1080 120, 1080 120. Very nice though is that we did get an S&Q mode, so you can quickly just tap through your modes from photo to video to S&Q with the button on top there. That is always a benefit to have that just kind of built in, ready to go. We do still have that built-in ND filter, which I love. It's probably like one of the key features that I love about this camera is a built-in ND filter. I think any camera that is video centric, that is video focused, it should have built-in ND filters. FX3, I'm looking at you. And then another thing that I am surprised that this camera did not get was the dynamic stabilization from the ZV-1. We still have active stabilization, so you can turn off stabilization entirely, or you can turn on active stabilization. You get a little bit of a crop, but again, at 18 millimeters, that's not the end of the world. But on the ZV-1, we now have that dynamic stabilization that's honestly on par with something like a GoPro. Like a GoPro's stabilization is just so bananas good, and now the ZV-1 just has that built in. It's a mode, you just flip into dynamic, and now it's gonna crop in more, but it's gonna give you like gimbal-like footage. I was almost certain that the Mark II ZV-1 was gonna have dynamic stabilization. It feels like this camera should be able to do dynamic stabilization. And then we do have those very like creator-centric functions on there. We have product showcase on there, so I can hold something up. See how when I hold something up to the camera, my camera doesn't even care about it? That's because the A7S III does not have product showcase because it's focused on my face. But on here, if you hold something up to the lens, it's gonna focus on that thing while product showcase is enabled. You can also do skin smoothing, which I don't think anyone should be doing. And then the last thing you can do just built into here is that auto bokeh section. So you just pop that button. Essentially what it does is it automatically throws your camera into aperture priority mode, and then it dumps the aperture, just opens it up as wide as it can go. On here, again, you're at f1.8 on the wide end and f4 on the narrow end, and it's gonna try to blur out that background for you. But it's not doing any of that blurring like in post. Like it's not like trying to cut you out and do it like your iPhone does it. So it's really just, again, putting it in aperture priority mode and then making the aperture as wide as it can go for the zoom that you have the camera currently at. And if people aren't sure how to do all this stuff for a beginner camera, that's kind of nice to have. Like it's kind of nice to just have a button to go, I don't know, the easy button. And two more things I will save the very best for last, or the thing that made me go, oh, yes, thank you Sony for listening to us. I'll save that for last. The next up thing though is we do have that cinematic vlog mode that the ZV-1 introduced us to. Although it has one massive difference. Now, when you click on Cine Vlog mode on, you get those two black bars on top and bottom. It automatically flips the camera to 24 frames a second. And then you have these look and mood settings you can go through between classic and clean and chic and fresh and mono, which is just black and white. Cinematic mode is kind of cool to have. Again, like having that auto bokeh button, that auto defocus background button. It's taking things and it's a clever feature for beginners. That's how I will put it kindly. I don't think I will ever use cinematic mode, but the main reason I will not use cinematic mode is because unlike the ZV-1 that when it flips to Cine Vlog or Cine Vlog mode, that sets that camera to S-Cinetone, and this camera does not have S-Cinetone. Another massive shock for this when this camera was being announced to me, they were walking me through the settings. I was like, oh, they're about to say S-Cinetone. Oh, it's coming. They're gonna say it. And then they never said it, which is such a bummer because it has S-Log3 gamma curves. We have that S-Gamut Cine color space on here, so you can do S-Log3, but you cannot do S-Cinetone, which is odd because S-Log3, now this camera, it does not have 10-bit recording either. That's another big shocker. I thought for sure we were gonna get 4K 60, we were gonna get S-Cinetone, and we were gonna get 10-bit. And I was wrong on all three of those. We did not get any of those three things. Now, the thing with the 8-bit versus 10-bit files is that if you are shooting in S-Log3, but 8-bit files, you better nail your exposure and your colors because 8-bit files in post, they don't push around very well. Like when you start to, if you're overexposed, you're underexposed, and you really start to try to move that exposure or move colors around, the footage kind of falls apart, which is why it would have been so dang nice to have had S-Cinetone built into this camera. Okay, the very last feature that really makes me happy about this camera is they moved the mounting screw on the bottom of the camera. If you saw my video 2 years ago on the ZV-1, Morgan and I, we went rollerblading down in Pacific Beach, and I had a little tripod plate mounted on my camera. And with this camera, if a tripod plate is mounted on the bottom, look at that. You can't get into the battery door because the tripod plate blocks the battery door. I can't change the battery on the ZV-1 right now because with an Allen key, I put the plate in and you can't get the battery or the card out while the plate is in, but I forgot to bring an Allen key. Crap, why don't I just have one in this bag? Well, that's a real problem with the ZV-1 and the whole Allen key thing. And they got clever. Let me mount this one on there so you can see. Check that out. They moved the mounting plate all the way over to this side so the battery door can just pop open. It's those little things that when you're just looking at the camera, you're like, oh, that's just how the camera works. But then when you're actually using it, like actual real world scenarios, you realize like that matters so much. And I'm very excited that the plate is way over here. So that is the Sony ZV-1 Mark II. That's everything new from the ZV-1 Mark I to Mark II. How will I be using it? Who is this camera for? It's obviously focused towards content creators. If you are a small channel, I would say this is probably the only camera that you need. You probably pick up this camera and some wireless mics and you could do a heck of a channel just with that setup. Even for those creators, I do wish it had 10-bit recording. I do wish it had S-Cinetone built in, but just how it is, this is a super, super impressive camera and a very welcome addition to this camera. The ZV-1 Mark I, again, it was a great camera, but mainly just not wide enough. Like having the upgraded mic is nice, having that touchscreen is nice, but that lens is kind of why this camera will be living in my bag because I'm gonna use this for times when I don't wanna walk around with my giant camera. If I'm out in public and I wanna walk around just kind of filming with this thing, that's much easier. But also like when I'm filming my own life, like being able to have this little hip pack thing and my whole camera setup is just right here and I can play with my kids, I can do everything. And then when I wanna film something, I just kind of really quickly whip it out and bam, 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 shoot it and tuck it back away. I like that, man. This is gonna be a camera, same thing. It's gonna get used and abused as much as this camera did, but but now this camera. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts on the ZV-1 Mark II, a big upgrade from the ZV-1 Mark I to Mark II. Again, we did not get dynamic stabilization, 4K 60, S-Cinetone, or 10-bit recording that I really thought we were getting all 4 of those. But we did get a significantly wider lens, a much improved microphone, and now a fully functioning touchscreen. This was still touchscreen, you just couldn't do a lot on it. And now on this touchscreen, I can do everything on here. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments, and hopefully Sony gives us a firmware update to address maybe just a few of those things that we were missing. Other cameras have been able to go from 8-bit to 10-bit with just a firmware update. So maybe they could do it with this. Maybe we get S-Cinetone also. That would be awesome. All right, I'll see you guys soon.